Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Today marks 50 years since the end of one of Africa's bloodiest post-independence conflicts, the Biafra War. 3 states, all from the southeast and inhabited mainly by the Igbo ethnic group, tried to secede from Nigeria and create an independent republic. This sparked a bloody civil war which lasted almost 3 years and led to the surrender of the Biafrans. Between 1 and 3 million people are believed to have died in this war, mostly from hunger. Between 1 and 3 million people, like I said, are believed to have died from this war. In a moment, we'll be discussing the conflict in more depth. But first, how did the Biafra War affect people? Caroline Ogu was a schoolgirl when the war broke out. We recorded her speaking to her granddaughter Miracle about that time.
The Biafran people were not prepared. They had nothing. They were fighting, they have no gun. They were fighting, they have no bullet.
Grandma, what was life like for you before the war?
Life was good in the village. Some are traders, some are doing their businesses. Normal, just normal village life.
How did it change once the war started?
There was no market. There was a market, but the market will start from around 5 a.m. to 6 to 7. By 7:30, everybody has gone. No movement because of plane. If the plane are flying, what we do that time? They taught us. Immediately you hear the sound of plane, boo, take cover. Wherever you find yourself, you enter bush and lie flat on the floor, on the ground. You won't even care what is there until the whole thing is over. I lost my parents. My father joined the army and didn't come back till today. And because my mother, in fact, that was the first time I heard about stroke. She fell down. She shouted. I rushed there. She didn't walk. She didn't talk. After 1 week, my mother died. 2 of my brothers joined the army. And the day they came back home, it was really, they looked like skeletons. So to me, it wasn't good. It was, in fact, nobody used to even mention anything about war to me.
Joining me in the studio now is Dele Ogu, an author and historian who's published a book on the Biafra War. I'm also joined by Timothy Modu, whose father helped in the negotiations that brought about peace. Let me start with you, Dele. I mean, just briefly, if you could tell us what exactly led to this war and why was it so brutal?
Well, in short form, there was a series of pogroms which started in May, 29th of May, 1966, in which loads of Igbos were slaughtered, and it was followed by a further series of pogroms. The next one was 29th of July, the next one was 29th of September. So the secession move on the part of the Igbos was actually a defensive move. It was not an offensive move. They were retreating back to the eastern enclave, and then on 30th of May, they now declared Biafra.
And you know, I mean, this was a country that was won for the first 6 years post-independence. You know, why was it so brutal? Why did they seem to hate each other so much?
Well, it was never really one, because these were ancient nations, as different as the Scots are to the English and to the Welsh. They became one politically because the British colonial authorities, in the process of constructing empire, put them in the same sack. So that's the reality. Civil war almost is a misnomer because these were different peoples.
50 years on, Timothy, I mean, I think we should be talking about progress now, but has there been progress? Have lessons been learned from that war, from that conflict?
Well, it's interesting that actually we're talking about 50 years and asking the question whether lessons have been learned. It's really a very big question for me to sort of answer, because the there is no evidence on the ground that the effect of the war or the lessons that people normally learn from war has been learned. And the evidence is there. Otherwise, why would a group of people, even generations that weren't there when at the time of the war, I was a Biafran war child, so I would know. But to imagine that people who weren't born at that time begin to sort of, if you like, agitate and ask questions.
But you say that, I mean, 50 years on, the country, Nigeria, has managed to remain one, or has it?
It depends on whose point of view we're looking at. The word managed, it's probably the way to classify it. But if you then go within the nations that make up Nigeria, the central question will be, how does each nation fare about the after effect of the war? If you look at the Igbos or even the Yorubas, or look at the ethnic minorities or the minority groups, and you ask yourself, what's going on now? How do they feel about it? Did they feel that the lessons have been learned from the war, or are there more unanswered questions? My view, to some extent, is that it seems to me that we haven't learned from it. Otherwise, we will not be in the situation where we are now, where every nation in Nigeria is almost now, if you like, agitating for some kind of separation.
Dele, Timothy says the country hasn't learned any lessons from this very brutal war. Well, let me just come back. I mean, you know the history leading up to this agitation for secession. Now we can see the same agitations happening again, through MASOB, through IPOB, who are now agitating for a separate country. Was it the same thing that happened back in '66?
Well, you see, 66 was all of a sudden. As I said, it was a defensive move. What's happening now, the theory was that there was supposed to be no victor, no vanquished. And there was supposed to be reconciliation and reconstruction. The reality is that the lessons have not been learnt. Those lives have all been wasted, because we're now back again, full circle, back to a new generation shouting for Biafra. And they're not alone. There are other areas, other ethnic groups within the country who are all tired of the narrative and tired of the experience of Nigeria. You see, and the main lesson has not been learned by the victors, in inverted commas, because there's a level of impunity that's taking place now like never before. I mean, just yesterday there was a Supreme Court judgment concerning one of the states' governorship elections in the Igbo land, one of the core Igbo states, Imo State, and the Supreme Court judge, or the Supreme Court now reverses the outcome of what the people thought was their vote.
Was their voice. Listen, we're really running out of time, but I need to put this question to Timothy. Timothy, very briefly, no Igbo man has been Nigerian president since 1960. Do you think if an Igbo man is elected as the president come 2023, things might change?
Well, the short answer, we will never know, because like you said, Igbo men have never been president for 50 years. There is a case for Nigeria as a whole and the nation's Nigeria to show sign of, if you like, welcoming into it. But I think the most important thing first is to have that conversation where all groups will have to make a kind of conscious decision.
Okay,
and 2023 might be the opportunity.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
I do appreciate it. Dele Ogun and Timothy Modu, thanks for your input into this very, very important story. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.